Hello, everyone. My name is Diana Matthews, and I'm a librarian at Santa Fe College. Today, I'm going to be giving you an introduction to MLA as part of our Zoom into College Research webinar series. On the agenda for today, first, we will discuss why we cite. Then we're going to go over some citation guidelines and some citation examples. Finally, we'll end with some MLA resources. So first, we're going to start with why do we cite at all? There are three main reasons why you want to cite. First, you want to give credit to the original creator of the work. As you are using ideas or words from other people, you want to give credit to the people who originally came up with them. Second, it allows your readers to retrace your steps. So if I am reading your paper and I find something that you say very interesting, I can use your in-text citation to find your full citation and locate the original source that you used and learn a little bit more about it. Finally, and probably the most relevant to you, it helps you avoid plagiarism. So plagiarism is taking somebody else's words or thoughts or ideas and presenting them as your own. Plagiarism is a very big deal at Santa Fe College. It's part of our student conduct code, and academic dishonesty can have some pretty dire consequences. You want to make sure that you are citing in order to avoid any intentional or unintentional plagiarism. So if you are taking people's words and you don't put a quotation mark around them, then that can be plagiarism. If you're using those ideas, you're paraphrasing, you've reworded it in your own words, but you don't include an in-text citation, that's also plagiarism. Most of the time, plagiarism is not intentional, it is unintentional. But you should always, whenever you're using these words or ideas from someone else, go ahead and put that citation in there. In this presentation, we're going to be going over the MLA style. And this comes from the MLA Handbook, the 8th edition. This is from the Modern Language Association, and it's typically used mostly in literature, English, and other types of humanities classes, although you may see MLA in other types of classes across the college. Just one note, there will be a 9th edition that is going to be published in April of 2021. So look for that, and we will have some resources for you around that time when it comes out about what maybe has changed. So there's two different types of citations within MLA. The first is an in-text citation, and you can see here this Beach and Lewis 7 to 8. This shows that it is coming from a work that is by authors named Beach and Lewis, and it's from pages 7 through 8. An in-text citation is a shortcut citation. It gives that little bit of information that you need to then match up to the full works cited page where you're going to have that full citation. So you can see that this full citation here shows that it is a book, and I can use this information to locate that book myself. Every in-text citation should have one full citation associated with it. So you're never going to have an in-text citation without a full citation in your works cited list. Let's go through some citation guidelines. MLA citations can have the following elements. There's 9 different types of elements, and not every citation is going to have all 9 components. It's probably pretty rare that you're going to have one with all 9. But you're going to always start with the author and then the title of the source that you're using. There's something called a container within MLA, which is something that contains the source. So for instance, if you have an article, then the journal that it's part of is a container. If you found that article in a database, then the database is another container. You might also have a page, which is your source, like a web page that you're using, and then the main website it's on would be that container. So the container is that bigger piece that's holding your source. There might be other contributors that you need to include besides just the author, like editors or someone else. You might have a version, like an edition. The number, which is something like number, the volume and issue that a article is published in a journal, that could be a number. There might be a publisher. There's usually going to be a publication date. And then you might also have a location, which is something like a URL or a DOI or perhaps a database that it was found in. You'll notice that at the end of each of these elements, there is punctuation, and this shows you what punctuation should always follow the element. So the author will always end with a period, the title of the source will always end with a period, and the location will always end with a period. The others, if you have multiple, will have commas. So some general guidelines. With your authors, you only have to list one or two, which is nice because some journal articles can have many authors. So if you have one author, you're going to list that one author, obviously. If you have two authors, you're going to list both of them. However, if you have more than two, you are going to list the first author and then you're going to include the abbreviation et al. And that does have a period after the AL. Et al is Latin and it basically means and everybody else. For titles, we're going to use title case capitalization, which means all important words will be capitalized. The only words that might be lowercase are going to be kind of these small words, things like in, the, and stuff like that. The only exception is if any of those little words are the first word of the title or the subtitle, in which case they will be capitalized. And you'll see a lot of examples of how our titles are capitalized throughout this presentation. For dates, you're going to list in day, month, year format. And you're going to abbreviate all months except for May, June, and July. And you'll abbreviate for the first three letters and a period. So for one example, you can see 21 Jan with a period, Jan period, short for January, 2020. You're not going to abbreviate May, June, and July because it doesn't really make sense since they're so short. For URLs, this is an interesting little quirk of MLA. You're going to remove the beginning https:// or potentially it's https:// from all links. So that beginning part, you're going to remove that from the links. So let's look at some citation examples. Let's look at how this looks in real life. We're going to start with a book. And so this is for a print book, a book you might hold in your hand. The template consists of the following. First, you're going to list the authors. It might be one, it might be two, it might be more. Remember, three or more, you're going to use the abbreviation et al. And remember that that author component will end with a period. Next comes the title of the book, and this is going to be in italics, and it also ends with a period. Keep in mind you need to include the subtitle of the book. If there is a subtitle, you need to list that entire title. If a book has an edition, for instance, if it's a second edition, a third edition, a revised edition, you're going to include that edition next. If there is no edition, or if it just says first edition, you don't need to include first edition. So if there's no edition, you'll just leave this off, and you will start with the next component, which is the publisher name. After a comma, you will include the date, and then end your citation with a period. So in this book is called DNA Technology. It's a second edition. This is what the citation looks like. First, we have the author's name. We have the last name, comma, and then the first name, and he has an initial, David E. Newton. So it's Newton, comma, David E. The title of the book is DNA Technology, a Reference Handbook. So all of these words are capitalized and the title is italicized, and there's a period after the title. I know that you don't see a reference handbook on the title or on the cover, but it is there if you open it up and you look at the title page. Because this is a second edition, and we're going to include that, but we are going to abbreviate it. So we're going to put 2ND, short for second, and we're going to abbreviate edition to ED period. The publisher of this book is ABC Clio, so I list that next with a comma, and then finally it was published in 2017, and I will end the citation with a period. If you read a book online, an ebook template is going to be very similar to a print book template. There'll just be about one or two extra things at the end. So again, we're going to start with the authors, the title of the book, the edition, the publisher, and the date with that period after the date. The additional things, if you found it in a database, you will include the database name in italics, a comma, and then the URL of where you found it. And then you will end that citation with a period. So just two extra things that you need at the end. So in this example, this is an ebook that I found through one of our library databases. And you'll see that this beginning part is pretty much the same, right? We have the author, we have the title. You'll notice that there is a little lowercase the right here because this is a little word. The publisher is Oxford University Press, and MLA has another weird little quirk where they like to shorten their citations a little bit. And if the word press is in the publisher, they'll abbreviate it to P, and if it's University Press, they will abbreviate it to UP. So in this case, Oxford University Press will be Oxford UP, and then a comma, 2016. So the database that this came from is eBook Central. So I put that in italics and then a comma, and then I put the URL of this book. And again, we're taking away that HTTPS or HTTP colon / from the beginning of this URL. And there is a period after the URL to end the citation. All right, so in our databases and in a lot of other sources, there are these handy dandy little cite buttons. So people will click that button and it will tell you what an MLA citation will look like. But unfortunately, these generated citations are not always correct. You're always going to need to double check them. So this is an example of a generated citation from the eBook Central database. And there's a few things that are wrong here. So I invite you to pause this video, look at the citation, and see what looks incorrect based on what we have already discussed. So the first thing is that there is a space here between the title and the colon. Just a weird little thing, an extra space. At the end of the title, it has a comma instead of a period, so that is incorrect. The name of the database should be italicized, and it is not. And also, they did not remove the HTTPS :/ from the citation. And the other general formatting issue is that it is not in hanging indent format. And so you might have noticed that in these past citations, it has a hanging indent where the first line is all the way to the left and all future lines are kind of indented probably about ½ an inch. A hanging indent is necessary for our citations, and it's really easy to do in a word processing program. You should really never hit the enter button and tab over to make it create a hanging indent. Instead, use your built-in features. If you're using Word, the Control-T keyboard shortcuts, if you hit the Control button and T together, it will create that hanging indent for you. If you're using a different word processing software, just Google, the name of that software and hanging indents, and you should be able to find out how to make that happen. So this will be what the corrected citation looks like. We fixed those errors and we have formatted it with a hanging indent. Okay, so moving on to the next format. The next thing we're going to look at are newspaper articles. So of course, if you have one, you're going to start with the author. But newspaper articles are one type of format where you might not have a specific author. There's frequently articles that don't have a byline, that don't have an author listed. So if you don't have an author, just leave that off and you will begin with the next component, which is the title of the article. And you'll notice that the title of the article is in quotation marks, and it is in normal font. It is not italicized. So your source here is the title of the article. But the next component, the newspaper title, is italicized. And in this case, the newspaper title is the container. Remember, we were talking about those containers, something that contains something smaller. And so the newspaper title itself will be italicized. Now, if the newspaper title does not include the city that it is part of, so for instance, the Gainesville Sun does include Gainesville in the title, so we don't need to do anything. But if you're using a different newspaper that does not include the city, in square brackets, you will put the city, and then you'll have the comma. If you already have the city in the title, you don't need to do that. After the newspaper title and the city component, if needed, you're going to put the full date. So newspapers are published every day, so it's important for us to have the full date here. And remember, we are going to format it using that day, um, and then the month, and then the year format. And then we're going to be abbreviating the month. The next part will be another container, either the database that you found it in or the website if you found it online, and those are italicized, a comma, and then the URL. So in this citation, this is an example of a newspaper article where there is no author. So we're going to start with just the title, which is Doctors Try First CRISPR Gene Editing in the Body for Blindness. And again, these are in quotation marks. The title of the newspaper comes next, the Breeze Courier. And this is an example of a newspaper title that does not have the name of a city in its title. So we've added that in square brackets, Taylorville. There is a comma and then the full date. So 5, March is abbreviated as MAR period, and then 2020. I found this article through the Newsbank database, so I list that here, Newsbank in italics. There's a comma, and then I put the URL, which is a little long. Some URLs can be a little bigger than others. And I have removed that HTTPS from the beginning. The Newsbank database is a great place to find a lot of different newspaper articles, but their citation generator is pretty bad, to be honest. So you can see that this is the generated citation of one article that I found, and there's a lot going on here, a lot of things that we don't really need, that are incorrectly formatted, etc. So again, take a moment, pause this video, review it, and see how many errors you can spot. So the first thing that should jump out at you is this author part here. Beyond the fact that it's in all capital letters, which is an error and we need to fix that, there's this beginning part here, Associated Press. So this person here, it looks like works for the Associated Press. And when her name was entered as the author, they added Associated Press to her name. So the computer program that creates these citations basically thinks her last name is Associated Press, which is why Associated Press comes first with a comma. So that definitely needs to be fixed. We don't need to include Associated Press. We just need her name with her last name, a comma, and then her first name, and it does need to be correctly capitalized. The capitalization errors continue with the title of the actual article in all capital letters as well. Needs to be fixed. Newsbank also always includes the state that a newspaper is published in parentheses to help the reader know, but that does not need to be included in the citation, so that needs to be removed. And they also have all sorts of things about where it was published, like what edition it was in, what section, and it also even has a page number, and we don't need that for these online newspaper articles. Finally, this is something that a lot of the online databases do. They've added an access date to the end. The access date at the end is an optional element, and it's really not necessary unless you're citing something where the contents are likely to change a lot. So for instance, just throwing it out there, a Wikipedia page. Now we all know we should not be citing a Wikipedia page, but that is something where it's likely to change. So that's an example of where you might have an access date. And the other reason why you might need an access date is if you're citing something where you cannot find a date from when it was published, which is pretty common for web pages. In this case, though, we do have a date. We know it was published March 5th, 2020, so we don't need this access date. That's not necessary. And so this is the much nicer, cleaner MLA citation for this newspaper article. I have removed that access date because it's not necessary. Another type of article, and one that you're going to find frequently throughout your time here at Santa Fe College and in the future, are going to be journal articles. And journal articles are a little bit more complicated to cite, but there is a template that helps you make sense of it all. So again, we're going to list those authors, one or two, and this is where you're going to be very grateful for that rule because some journal articles can have quite a few authors. I'm pretty sure that the Record journal article has more than 500 authors, believe it or not. And so aren't you glad you don't have to list all of them? So we're going to list our authors first. Again, the title is in quotation marks, again, because it's a smaller part of something bigger. In this case, the journal title, which comes next in italics. After the journal title, there is a comma, and then we're going to include the volume with the abbreviation VOL period, the number or issue, it's either one, and that is abbreviated by NO period, and you're going to use that NO period regardless whether they call it an issue or a number. Another comma, the date, a final comma, and then the page range, and the page range is preceded by the abbreviation PP period, which stands for pages. If you found this journal article online through a database, then you're going to include the database next in italics, and you're going to recognize this as being very similar to what we did for the ebook. After the database, there is a comma, and then you're going to include either a DOI or a URL. If there is a DOI on your article, you should always use that. Even if you have a URL, if there's a DOI, that comes first. It always takes precedent. A DOI is sort of like an ISBN for scholarly articles, and so it's very helpful in tracking down articles. You're going to see DOIs on the front page of articles or in the information at the top or bottom of an article. And a DOI usually starts with 10 period. So it's going to have a 1, 0, a period, and then a long string of numbers or letters. If there is no DOI, then you are free to add a URL, and then you're going to end your citation with a period. So here is one example of a journal article. This article has 3 authors, and because of that, we're only going to list the first author, Lau, Ricky W.K. There'll be a comma, and then that Latin abbreviation, that et al. Period. The title of the article is in quotation marks. That ends with a period, and note that the period comes inside the quotation marks, not outside. The journal's name is Nephrology, so that is italicized. There's a comma. It's volume 23, number 11. We know that it's November 2018, so we're going to include that, but we don't have a precise date. That's okay. We don't need the day. And then the pages it's on is 981 to 990. That part ends with the period. I found this journal article through Academic Search Complete, so I'm going to list that in italics. There'll be a comma, and then I'm going to include the DOI. And you can see this DOI here that has that 10.1111/NEP.13410. This is sort of what a DOI looks like. Some DOIs that you're going to find may be formatted in a URL format. Because you can format DOIs into a URL and just click it and that'll take you to that main page. So you might need to take it out of that URL format and just have that 10 point whatever after that DOI colon. And you'll notice that there is no space, DOI colon, no space. Here's an example of a journal article that does not have a DOI, and a lot of humanities and literature articles may not have DOIs, and older ones as well. DOIs are probably within the last few decades, so and it really started with science and technology and medical journals, so it's taken a while to spread, but it has gone ahead and it's finding itself in a lot of the scholarly articles out there. So again, this is multiple authors. So we've got that first author in et al. We have the title, we have the journal it's in, the volume, the issue, the year. In this case, we only have a year, and it's pages 5 through 8. The database for this one is JSTOR, so that's all in italics. And then we have a URL from the database here because there is no DOI. And still, we're going to take away that HTTPS and end with a period. Here's another example of one of those generated citations that just have some issues. This is a journal article from our Academic OneFile database from Gale. So just like before, take a look, see what works, see what doesn't work. So first of all, the title is not capitalized correctly. There's way too many lowercase words here, so we're going to need to do some edits with that. Next, there is no page range listed, and so Gale put NA, which typically means not applicable, but it's not on page NA. So in the page field, they put NA, but that shouldn't be included here. We should just leave that off. If there is no page range, we'll just leave that off. And we're also going to see again that HTTPS:// being left on. And because all databases love to do it, they've added that access date again, even though it's not necessary. And so this would be the corrected citation here, fixing those errors. Web pages are probably going to be one of the other most commonly cited formats. And so a web page, we're going to start with the authors if there is one. And a lot of times you might not be able to find a personal author. There will be the title of the web page in quotations again. The title of the website is in italics, a comma. If there is a publisher or sponsor, then you'll include that here, although you might not have that. A lot of them don't. If you can find a date, you're going to include that here as well. But you do need to make sure you have an actual date that something was uploaded or published. You do not want to use a copyright date. Copyright dates typically just apply to the entire website, and they just say that the that organization or that person is asserting copyright over all of the contents. And so typically that copyright date will just be whatever the most recent year is. So whatever year we're in is the copyright because they're saying, I have copyright over that up to now. That does not mean that the page you're using was created within this year. So you never want to use copyright dates. If you don't have a date, you're just going to leave this off. Then finally, you're going to end with the URL and a period. Now you'll see this access date here. So after several instances of me telling you you don't need it, web pages are one place where you might want to put it, especially if you don't have a date that something was published. And so this is not always necessary again, but it is something that might be included. This is a web page from the Pew Research Center, and there are two authors, and I believe this might be the first time that we've seen two authors in a citation within this presentation. And so in this case, you can see that the first author is formatted like we're used to with the last name, comma, first name. There'll be a comma after that first author. Then we're going to spell out the word and then we're going to put the second author, but the first name comes first. So this is slightly differently. So instead of the last name, it's going to be the first name first. So Funk, comma, Carey, comma, and Meg Hefferon. That'll be the title, or the author, sorry. The title comes next in quotation marks. This is a little bit of a long title. The Pew Research Center believes in being very descriptive. That comes next, the title of the website it's on, which is the Pew Research Center. And I didn't find any sponsor or publisher, so that part doesn't need to be included. I did see a complete date. Over here we can see it said it was August 16th, 2018. So we're listing that 16 Aug period, short for August 2018. Finally, after the comma is our big long URL, and this again is a big long URL, taking away that HTTPS. Here's another example of a web page. In this case, though, we don't have a date, and we do have a publisher. So we do have an author. We're going to list that person's name, and the title of the page is Genetic Engineering. The National Human Genome Research Institute is the page that it's on. You can see that here. And this is actually part of the National Institutes of Health. So we'll go ahead and put that in the sort of publisher sponsor area. There is no date, so we have left this off and we've moved on to the URL. Because there's no date, I did put an access statement at the bottom. One more example of a web page. In this case, we don't have a person who's in charge of it. And so if that's the case, then we typically would say that whatever organization published it would be the author. However, if the author is the same as the website, then you're not going to include both. And instead, you'll just leave that in the website area. And you'll start with the title. So in this case, what is genetic engineering and how does it work? We'll start first. You'll notice that the title of the page ends in a question mark, which means we don't need a period afterward. So if it already ends in some sort of punctuation mark, we don't have to add on a period. That would be a little weird with a question mark period. Move on to the name of the website, Ag Biosafety, and then the publisher, University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Again, there's no date, so we go straight on to the URL, taking away that beginning part, a period, and then I'm going to add this access statement. Reports are very, very similar. And a lot of times reports are going to be in PDF format, and they're going to have a lot of information in there. So just like before, you're going to have the authors. You're going to have the title of the report in italics because reports stand on their own. You're going to put the date, as much of the date you have. If there is a series, and I'll show you what that looks like, you're going to put the series that it's part of, a period. Then whatever website you got it from, italicized, a comma, and the URL. So in this case, this is a report from the USDA. If you look all the way on the left, you can see it says Economic Research Report number 162. It shows that it is part of a series. There are 4 authors, so I've got the first one and et al. I've got the title of the report, a period, the date 2014, period. Economic Research Report number 162 comes next, and we are abbreviating number to NO period, just like we do for the journals. It is published on the USDA website, so I've spelled that out, United States Department of Agriculture, and provided the URL. Many reports are not going to have series. So this is an example of one without. We have an author, we have the title, we have the date, we have the web page that it's, or the website that it's on, and then the URL. So pretty easy. One thing you need to be careful about, though, is that a lot of reports may have this thing where it says recommended citation format for this publication, and you might be very tempted to say perfect and copy and paste that and not do anything with it. Even though this is a citation, it is not a MLA citation. There are tons of different citation formats out there. So beyond MLA, some of the ones you may have heard already are APA and Chicago. There's lots of other types of citations out there that you maybe have not heard of, like CSE, ASA, AMA, ABNT. So there's a lot of different types of citations out there. And just because it is a citation does not mean it is an MLA citation. So this is very, very incorrect for being MLA, and you do need to do a lot of adjusting to make this fit MLA format. We would need to go ahead and put it in the correct order, format the authors correctly, do different formatting and capitalization, include the URL. That other ones didn't even include the URL because they also published them in print. It doesn't have the website. So lots of stuff here that it was either missing or was incorrect. We've been doing a lot of text, different sources. So moving on to a little bit of media, YouTube videos are cited this way. You're going to put the creator of the video first, and then the title of the video in quotation marks because it's just like a web page. It is something small on a bigger website. The website is in italics. Then, if it was uploaded by someone different than the creator, you're going to put uploaded by and then provide the username. And so this is also important if you don't know the specific creator. So you might not have a creator. You might start with the title of the video and then you might include uploaded by to give that information. So this happens a lot, if you have some username named SkaterBoy8 and they have uploaded some historical footage of, D-Day, they probably were not the ones who created that. So in that case, if we're not sure who the creator is, we would leave that off and then we would just include the uploaded by SkaterBoy8. There should be a full date on YouTube, so you're going to include the full date and then the URL. So this is a video from Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. The channel name is Last Week Tonight, and so we can be fairly certain that they are the creator because Last Week Tonight, this is their official channel. So that would be listed first. The name of the video, which is a little bit long because it includes the name of the show in it as well, is listed next within quotation marks. It is from YouTube, so YouTube is listed and it is italicized. It was uploaded July 1st, 2018. That full date is listed there. And then the URL is also included. Here's an example of a YouTube video where the one who's created it is a little different than the one who uploaded it. This happens a lot with TED Talks. So the person who's giving the TED Talk should really be the creator because they're the ones who are doing all the work. They came up with it, they gave it. So in this case, we list the speaker, Dudna, Jennifer. We put the name of her talk, how CRISPR lets us edit our DNA, and we say it's on YouTube. And then we'll include that uploaded by TED because it is part of the TED channel. And TED is the username. It was uploaded November 12, 2015. We've got that, and then finally put the URL. If you're going a little bit beyond YouTube and instead you're looking at things like a feature film, this is going to be cited differently. So first you're going to put whoever the main contributor is based on what you're focusing on. So if you're looking at somebody's acting ability, then the actor would be your main contributor. If you're looking at the special effects in a movie, then perhaps the special effects director would be your main contributor. Maybe you're looking at the costumes in a historical film. The costume designer would be your main contributor. So you're going to put whoever that main contributor is, and then after a comma, you're going to provide whatever their role is. Next, provide the title of the film, the title of the video in italics. If you want to include other important contributors, you're going to do that here. I would recommend the director at least if the director is not your main contributor. Next, after a comma, the film company that created it, a comma, and then the date it was released. So here's an example of Gattaca. In this instance, we're going to focus on Ethan Hawke's performance. So we're going to put Hawke, comma, Ethan, a comma, and then the role is performer. Gattaca is in italics. Because I didn't already include the director, I think the director is a pretty main contributor, so I say directed by Andrew Niccol. There are two film companies here, so we're listing them both with a slash in between them. So Columbia Pictures / Jersey Films, and it came out in 1997. If you're not really focusing on one particular person or anything and you just want to kind of talk about the film itself, you might want to just use the director as the main contributor. So in this case, it is very similar, but instead of Ethan Hawke, we have the director, Niccol, comma, Andrew, and we don't have any other main contributors. Okay, so that is a whole bunch of different types of formats for your full citations, but remember we also need those in-text citations in order to point our reader to where we got the information from. So in-text citations need two basic components, the author's last name, and then the page number the information came from if you do have a page number. You can format your citations, your in-text citations, two different ways. The first and the preferred way, if possible, is as a narrative citation. That means you're sort of weaving in the author's last names into the way that you introduce the information. What's nice about narrative citations is that it reads a lot better. It flows a lot throughout your paper, and it really helps your reader see where you're going with your arguments. So you'll typically start with the last name. You'll include some sort of signal phrase, which is how you sort of transition to some information. You'll include either a quote in quotation marks or a paraphrase of the information. And if it came from a certain page, then at the end of your sentence, you will put the page number in parentheses. So our first example, Parrington, and there's our last name, Parrington. Parrington discusses the inefficiencies of cloning a human person, but speculates that cloned human embryos could be used for therapeutic purposes. This comes from page 187, so 187 is in parentheses at the end of the sentence. Another example, this is from an article, I believe, that has more than one author. So it has 3 authors. So we're going to say Lau et al. Again, saying Lau and everybody else. Call this, and in this case, we have a direct quote. So this quote here is in quotation marks. So Lau et al. Call this, quote, an unprecedented opportunity to elucidate disease mechanisms, drug and toxicology screening, and potential cell replacement therapy in regenerative medicine. And then we're going to end the quotations there. For quotes, you should try to always put a page number if possible. And this page number is 985. The other way that you can introduce information is through a parenthetical citation, which is where the last name and the page number are at the end in parentheses. You definitely want to be careful about this. It works okay for paraphrasing, but when you're doing direct quotes, you don't want to just have a quote and then the in-text citation at the end. You really need to introduce that a little bit more. So in these two examples, the first one has a paraphrase where it says, based on a survey completed by the Pew Research Center, most Americans think genetic modification to inhibit mosquito reproduction is acceptable. And then this is one where it has 2 authors, so we're going to include both names, Funk and Hefferon, 5. And the 5 means that it's from the 5th page. Keep in mind that the and is spelled out and there is no comma anywhere in there. Some other citation styles have a comma before the page. This one does not. So it's just together. And then our second example, DNA is referred to as, and then this is a direct quote, the universal language. And this is one of the web pages that does not have an author. So if there is no author, what you will do is you will put in quotation marks within the parentheses the first few words of the title, so that, again, your reader can match that up. All right, so we've kind of gone through a lot, but there's always a lot more to learn, a lot more situations that will come up. First of all, the official handbook has a lot more information and it's a good place to go if you want to find out more about MLA. We do own it in the library. We have some available at the second floor reference desk to use in the library, but on our third floor circulating collection, we have a few that we'll check out. So if you'd like that, just ask a librarian and we can help you get that to check out. There are a lot of online things, however. The official MLA Style Center is a great resource to go to. It's at style.mla.org. And they have templates, they have a quick guide to Works Cited. They also have a really great source called Ask the MLA, where people write in more questions that are not included specifically, or there's specific circumstances, and the MLA will answer that, and that's included there. So it can be something like, how do I cite my the insert for a prescription label? Stuff like what you would not think that you would need to cite, but someone needed to cite it. And so you can look through those to see more of that. Our library also has an MLA citation guide that's available at sfcollege.libguides.com/MLA. If you go to the library website and you click the Guides button and then open up the Citation Guides area, you will see the MLA Citation Guide. Our guide will tell you how to format the paper. So we didn't really get into paper formatting, just the citation formatting, as well as give you a lot more examples of how to format citation components. And then lots of examples of how to cite books, articles, media, resources from the internet, things that don't fit in any of those buckets, in-text citations, as well as some video tutorials to help you go through how to create these citations. Now, if you have any questions at any point during your time here at Santa Fe College dealing with citations or any sort of research really, you can ask us. So feel free to email reference at sfcollege.edu. You can give us a call whenever we're open. Our phone number is 352-395-5409. You can also use our chat service. If you go to askalibrarian.org/sfcollege, you can access our chat and you can chat with us. So if you have any questions at all about MLA, citing, avoiding plagiarism, whether something should be cited or not, putting things in quotation marks, and again, all aspects of research, please ask us. I hope you learned a lot. Have a great one.